Live from downtown Bloomington, this is IU Sports Sunday with Nick Rodecap on 98.7 The Zone.
For the last time, good morning and welcome to IU Sports Sunday here on 98.7 The Zone. Nick Rodecap with you. It's over after today, which is unbelievable to think about. But a show that started because of a LinkedIn message that I got while on vacation with my family in the summer of 2024 comes to a close at 10 o'clock today in 2 hours. Let's make the most of it, shall we? Thanks so much for tuning in. On the final day of May in 2026, this show is ending because I am now a college graduate. And I have been working at 107.5 The Fan as a board operator and producer for about the last 3 weeks. And that job will now become my main focus, at least for the foreseeable future. Don't know what my future holds after that. But we still have plenty to talk about, even as all of IU's seasons are over, except for track and field. Every single other season, track and field and rowing, actually, the two exceptions there. Every other season is over, but it is silly season in the world of college football. And Curt Cignetti said something a couple of days ago to one of my fellow graduates, actually, that made the rounds nationally. Cignetti was speaking at an event, I think it was here in Bloomington. To be honest, I'm kind of out of the loop with this stuff now that I don't go to IU anymore. Hoosiers at Huber's was the event, according to Colin McMahon, who I graduated with from the media school. Hoosiers at Huber's, looks like Huber's, is a winery down in Borden, Indiana. I actually know somebody from Borden. Cruz Martin graduated from IU last year. He's from that neck of the woods. It's just northwest of Louisville. It's about one county over from the state line, one county over from New Albany, that area. So southeast Indiana. Cignetti speaking at an event there earlier this week. And he offered his thoughts on the current NIL situation. And he said, quote, "Universities won't be able to survive. College football won't exist the way we're going right now." Cignetti called the market pretty expensive, says it's scary. He says he thinks players should get paid, but something is going to have to be done in the next 12 to 24 months, or universities aren't going to be able to handle this. So, Cignetti, talking about the unsustainable nature of NIL, has drawn the ire of some people. There was a column written about how Cignetti is a hypocrite and how Cignetti, talking about the thing that made his program, is not a good look. Talking negatively about NIL, without which Indiana's success likely would not have been possible, is not a good look. And this is written by Austin Bundy. I don't know who Austin Bundy is. Never heard of them in my life, but the headline is the headline is Curt Cignetti's NIL ultimatum makes the Big Ten look like hypocrites. Same quote that I just gave here, talking about how players should get paid, but he calls it scary. Now, this is factually inaccurate. Austin writes, Cignetti and the Hoosiers just won the 2026 College Football Playoff National Championship. That part is true. With a roster made up almost entirely of transfers enticed by NIL payments. That is not true. That is not true. You look at some of the guys who were impactful on that national championship team. Elijah Surratt transferred from James Madison. He followed Cignetti, so he wasn't enticed by NIL. Omar Cooper was recruited by Tom Allen. Not enticed by NIL. Those are your top two receivers right there. E.J. Williams also played for Tom Allen. Not enticed by NIL. So your top three receivers. Charlie Becker was recruited by Tom Allen. Carter Smith, who will be a first-round pick at left tackle next year, also recruited by Tom Allen. Kalon Black was recruited by Cignetti, followed him over from James Madison. Not enticed by NIL. Roman Hemby was basically given the boot from Maryland by Coach Mike Locksley. Roman Hemby didn't have a home there anymore. He gambled on himself by coming to Indiana. Not enticed by NIL. Aiden Fisher, middle linebacker, the anchor of the defense, not enticed by NIL. He followed Cignetti from, you guessed it, James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Mikhail Kamara, the edge rusher, whose presence alone altered the way that teams approached Indiana's defense schematically, transferred from James Madison. Not enticed by NIL. I could keep going. Austin Bundy. Let's see. D'Angelo Pons. Not enticed by NIL. He followed Cignetti over from James Madison. Jamari Sharp, who had the game-sealing interception in the national championship game. Recruited by Tom Allen. Not enticed by NIL. So you can just throw stuff at the wall. And this writer is not the first. Austin Bundy talking about how Curt Cignetti's, quote, NIL ultimatum makes the Big Ten look like hypocrites, end quote. You can just randomly throw stuff out willy-nilly, and if you repeat it enough, it might seem like it's true. You've seen this on social media, I am sure. One of the biggest, quote, talking points, I say loosely, is that Indiana had a roster made up of 25 and 26-year-olds, and it seems like every time somebody brings this up, the number keeps getting bigger. First it was 25-year-olds, then it was 26-year-olds. I've seen people saying they had 30-year-olds playing. Maybe it's hyperbole, but the sentiment is that Indiana allegedly used a bunch of 8th and 9th and 10th year seniors and guys who couldn't hack it in the NFL, and Cignetti just brought in a bunch of hired guns for one go around, and it's a flash in the pan, and it won't ever amount to anything. And again, if you repeat something enough, you delude yourself into thinking that it's true. So Austin Bundy saying that Cignetti won the national championship with a roster made up almost entirely of transfers enticed by NIL payments. Yeah, if you say that enough, it becomes true to you. But that is factually incorrect. And that's one thing that I am really tired of, and I have been tired of it for a long time. I am really sick of people speaking on things that they don't know anything about. And it's so obvious which people don't know squat about anything when it comes to IU football when you read stuff like this. Listen, Cignetti is right in that sounding the alarm on NIL is something that has to happen. I think more coaches need to get on board. Kirby Smart said something, and he got flack for it, but these coaches are starting to realize that it is not sustainable. Building these rosters made up of 8-figure sums of money year after year after year. Sure, with Indiana, the Hoosiers are in a very advantageous spot right now because it just worked. The investment paid off with the ultimate prize. But, and this is going to be a reality check for IU fans, it's going to be very hard for them to repeat. Just because now everybody is putting that target on Indiana's back. Hey, are you going to be the first team to beat IU since Notre Dame did so about almost 24 months ago? Are you going to be the first team to beat IU since they won the national championship? Man, I'd really love to be that team. I'd really love to be that team. But to go back to what Austin Bundy was saying here, talking about all these transfers that were allegedly enticed by NIL payments, more impact players. I could keep going. I've already listed off so many. Let's see. Hosea Wheeler transferred over from Western Kentucky. Do you think that he was enticed by NIL? Hosea Wheeler, defensive lineman for Indiana football. I don't think Hosea Wheeler was enticed by NIL payments coming over from Western Kentucky. I could be wrong. I mean, I almost wish that NIL payments were made public, but Hosea Wheeler, an impact player, 4 tackles for loss, 31 total tackles, 2 quarterback hits, 2 fumble recoveries for Indiana. Jonathan Brady had that punt return touchdown against Old Dominion. Followed Fernando Mendoza over from Cal. And look, Fernando Mendoza reportedly got 7 figures to come to Indiana. But the fact of the matter is, he also had a chance to go to Georgia. And I am willing to bet my bottom dollar staying on topic when it comes to money here, that Georgia probably has a bigger NIL war chest than Indiana football did heading into 2025. Because Cignetti has talked about repeatedly how he's not just going to recruit the biggest talent in the transfer portal. Like, oh, you've got a lot of stars, big whoop. Who cares about stars? That is Cignetti's attitude on this. He doesn't care about how highly touted you are. He cares about your character and whether or not you're going to fit his scheme. So again, if you tell yourself something enough, it becomes true. But that doesn't make it factual. And when it comes to people saying that Mark Cuban wrote a blank check to Cignetti and Indiana bought a national championship, you could not be more wrong. And we have been over this, and I am far from the only person that has talked about this. Mark Cuban did not write a blank check so Indiana could bring in the best transfers and win the national championship by having more talent than anybody else. That did not happen. And if you want to talk about talent, why did Ohio State not go back-to-back? That's my question to you. Because you look at the amount of players that Ohio State had selected in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft this year. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Ryan Day had a loaded roster. And that doesn't even mention Jeremiah Smith, who is going to be the first receiver taken next year. Jeremiah Smith is an unbelievable player. He was an unbelievable player on a team loaded with first and second round NFL draft talent. And Ohio State lost the Big Ten championship game to Indiana and then subsequently got bounced from the college football playoff by Miami. Insane. It is insane to think that Indiana just bought the most talent and rolled over everybody. That's not true. Curt Cignetti and Indiana football won a national championship because of superior coaching and execution, not because they had the most talented roster. And that's the thing. Fernando Mendoza was extremely raw when he came over from Cal. You could tell the potential was there, but it hadn't really been unlocked yet. And Cignetti spoke about this early in the season. Even going into the season, talking about how Fernando's decision-making, his processing speed, had to be better. He wasn't making decisions quick enough. His footwork wasn't great in the pocket. But to insinuate that, yeah, he only came here because of money. No, he came here because of coaching as well. Sure, money was a part of it. That's the way the game is played. That is the way the game is played. And yes, Indiana needed money to compete, but money is not the only reason Indiana is successful. Money isn't. It just isn't. You look at Cignetti's track record, he's been successful everywhere he's been. And look, 200 other FBS programs. I actually don't remember how many FBS programs there are. There are a lot. I think it's 134. I said 200. I was thinking of the basketball number, which is about 365 Division I programs. In any case, over 100 other programs could have recruited any of the transfers that Indiana brought in with Cignetti. They maybe did recruit, but they ultimately did not win that recruiting battle. That's their loss. How about Lewis Moore? Lewis Moore is another one who I haven't even mentioned yet. He started his career at a junior college, actually, but he started his Division I career at Indiana. He went to Ole Miss for a year and then came back to Indiana. Why would you leave the SEC? Again, Lane Kiffin, a very controversial figure, cult of personality in his own right. I feel like Ole Miss, their NIL war chest could compete with Indiana. Hey, Stephen Daly led the Big Ten in tackles for loss with 19. Didn't play in the playoff because he was injured celebrating in the Big Ten championship. Stephen Daly transferred to Indiana from an 0-12 Kent State team. Do you think that people were willing to throw him big sums of money considering he played on a winless team in 2024? Look me in the eye and tell me that Stephen Daly was a highly sought-after transfer recruit when it comes to the money side of things. You can't do it because I guarantee you it's not true. Who in the world would look to an 0-12 Kent State team? Curt Cignetti, who's got an elite eye for talent. But again, all of these guys that followed Cignetti over from James Madison, NIL was not at the top of their minds. Here's one, Riley Nowakowski. He became sort of an H-back, a fullback type player for Indiana. He was drafted as a fullback by the Steelers. He is a former walk-on at Wisconsin. He couldn't get any playing time under Luke Fickell. So he came to Indiana. He became a captain. And he made an unbelievable catch, the longest catch of his career at Penn State that had helped set up Omar Cooper's game-winning touchdown catch. But Riley Nowakowski didn't get much playing time at Wisconsin. Played in 9 games in 2023. Played in all 12 in 2024, but he didn't really do much in the stat sheet. So he transferred. He came to Indiana. Again, not a very sought-after player, but he turned himself into an NFL draft pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you're going to tell me that he was enticed by NIL? Pat Coogan, the center, the brains of the offensive line. Was he enticed by NIL? Because as I recall, Marcus Freeman didn't want him anymore. Freeman basically told Pat Coogan after Notre Dame fell short in the national championship, Marcus Freeman said, hey, Pat, we don't really have a place for you on this roster anymore. So get out. Leave. We don't want you. I don't want to play with you anymore. As Sid said to Woody in Toy Story. I think it was to Woody. Toy Story 3. Drew Evans at left guard. A huge piece of the offensive line. And you know how I know he was a huge piece? Because he was injured. Indiana's offensive line looked a little more like Swiss cheese than it did with him in it. Drew Evans, unbelievable at left guard. Part of that offensive line in 2024 that was a national semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award. And oh, by the way, they were Joe Moore finalists last year. Drew Evans was an anchor on that offensive line at left guard. He transferred over after 2022, so he was recruited by Tom Allen, which means, and say it with me, everybody, he was not enticed by NIL. I mean, I could keep listing these players. The only one where you could say NIL was maybe a factor was Fernando Mendoza. Yeah, you've got to pay to get quality quarterbacks. It's one thing to have those quarterbacks on your roster. It's another thing to elevate their play, and that is what Chandler Whitmer did, the Indiana quarterbacks coach, who has now gone back to the NFL. But you saw Whitmer at Fernando Mendoza's pro day. He came back. Charlie Becker, like I said before, was recruited by Tom Allen. I mean, I could go down the list here, but you get the point. Curt Cignetti sounding the alarm on NIL is not hypocritical. If anything, it is self-aware that, yes, Indiana may have benefited from NIL. NIL was not the sole reason that the Hoosiers won a national championship. It's just not. And he factually is right that when it comes to the current landscape of college football, the NIL system, the way it is right now, where teams dump 8-figure sums of money, the top teams, the tippy top of the Power Four, drop huge sums of money, $10+ million at least. That's on the low end for some of these teams, allegedly. And again, these numbers aren't explicitly made public. When you look at the FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, that some reporters make when it comes to obtaining a university's financial records with their athletic department, NIL is not included in that. That's your operating expenses. Things like salaries, travel, facilities costs, things of that nature. But NIL is not included in that. It's not. So all you have is conjecture, rumors, speculation, valuations. But just because somebody is valued, for example, at $400,000 does not mean that they are making $400,000 in NIL. And I really wish that information was public, because I think a lot of Indiana's naysayers would be surprised. Indiana is not going around throwing stacks of $100 bills out their car window like Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad to recruit these players. They're just not. I guarantee you Indiana was not in the top 10 in NIL spending last year. I guarantee it. Or your money back. NIL money, that is. But Cignetti's right. We need to figure out a middle ground. He's right that the players should be paid. I think most people agree on that. There are billions of dollars in media rights wrapped up in these athletes. They deserve to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. And I think that the original sales pitch of NIL, while it's been perverted beyond belief, was a pretty good way to go about it. Things like appearing in commercials for local companies. Aiden Fisher had one with an HVAC company or something that played at Memorial Stadium during games this year. DeColdest Crawford, wide receiver, I believe at Louisiana Tech, had one, making sure your house can be DeColdest. The players having their likenesses in video games. That was huge, because that's how we got the college football games back. By the way, Signetti front and center on the cover of College Football 27. Can you believe that? Memorial Stadium featured on the cover of College Football 27. Can you believe that? I can't. I saw a leak yesterday. I didn't think it was real, but it is. Without NIL, we don't have those games. We don't have different ways for people to stay involved in college football. We don't have players getting the opportunities to capitalize on their brands during a very limited window in their lives where their brand is the most valuable it will ever be in most cases. Because fact is, 98% of NCAA athletes go pro in something other than sports. And you look at the amount of college football players, yeah, most of them aren't going pro. What are there, 253 NFL draft picks plus some undrafted free agents? That's it. That's not a lot of players. I mean, when you consider there are approximately 90 to 100 on a roster. Now, obviously, they're not all on scholarship, and you get the point. Most of these guys, their brand will never be as valuable as it is right now. So they deserve to capitalize on that. But NIL has become pay for play, and we know this. We know that NIL has gotten so twisted that now you have players entering the transfer portal and just trying to go to the highest bidder for a one-year thing where they make as much money as they can, and then they get out, and then they go somewhere else, even if they had a great season. And that's one of the things that Indiana has been pretty careful of, is not hunting bag chasers. And when I call somebody a bag chaser, what I mean is not hunting people who are just in it for the money. Because now that is absolutely going to be a factor. That Indiana is going to have to deal with guys from maybe mid-level Power 4 schools, mid-level conference schools, guys who have produced at a lower level on less successful teams maybe, who want to prove themselves. That's the sales pitch that they have, but really they're just in it for the money. Why do you think Signetti ripped Nick Marsh for wearing gold cleats at practice? He doesn't have time for ego. You are going to do things his way, and his way seems to work pretty well, so I'm not going to object to that. But we can't keep having this song and dance every offseason where donors are asked to give money to the university so that they can bring in, to the athletic department. Those are two separate entities, and that's an important distinction to make. Athletic department, university, separate. Donors are asked to give money to the athletic department so that they can invest in NIL for football, so that the team might be successful. But the caveat is that if the players play like garbage and go 0-12, or if they go 12-0 in the regular season, the NIL money is the same. And that is why I think moving forward, people will continue to be more hesitant to invest in NIL, especially if they're not getting the return that they want. Only one team is going to end the season happy with the ultimate prize of a national championship. Only one team. That's it. Everybody else is going to be disappointed. Sure, you win a bowl game. That's cool. And it's important to have perspective that for some teams, winning a bowl game is a successful season. But everybody wants to win the national championship. And I think that we're going to run into, and I feel like we may have already run into, donor fatigue, which is where donors get tired of giving large sums of money every offseason just to see their team continue to be stagnant. And you're going to see people being less willing to part with their hard-earned dollars so that they can pay some 20-year-old student athlete, and I use the term student athlete loosely because they're not students anymore, really. Some exceptions, but by and large, they're not. So that they can maybe be successful, but also that athlete will have no connection to the university, no emotional tie, because it'll probably just be one and done, and I think people are getting tired of that. And at some point, the well is going to run dry. At some point, you run out of money, and then what happens? I mean, we've already destroyed the regional structure that helped make college football so great. And it extends to other sports, too. For example, college baseball postseason's underway right now. Cal and Stanford flew all the way to North Carolina, or I think it was, to Georgia. I believe it was Georgia. to play a single elimination game in the ACC baseball tournament. It was either Georgia or North Carolina. It was either Truist Field or Truist Park. I'm trying to remember where it was, and I want to make sure I get the facts right here. Charlotte, North Carolina. They flew all the way to North Carolina to play a single elimination game, Cal did, against Stanford. Truist Field in Charlotte. They flew all the way across the country to play one single elimination baseball game and then go home. That is a result of greed when it comes to college football. And yes, I understand college football is the ultimate moneymaker. And you could say that NIL is going to be the thing that makes it all go, that keeps the best players playing at the top programs, keeps the most eyeballs on them. But the budgets keep going up. And Cignetti's not the only one to sound the alarm on this. Mike Elko of Texas A&M has done so as well. He said, quote, "If we don't get some level of regulation within the market, a lot of people are going to go bankrupt." Elko talking to David Hale of ESPN. "If it keeps going from where it's at, up another 20% and another 20%, Elko continues, we're 2.5 years away from having an NIL budget." And this is really interesting to me. That's more than the TV revenue for all of our universities. And when that happens, we're going to have some serious questions about how that gets funded. So the NIL money, the money coming in, will be bigger than the money going out to the universities. That's just too much. That is way too much to justify it. And I don't fault the players for capitalizing on their brands, for capitalizing on their value. But I do fault everybody involved when it comes to a control perspective, when it comes to an authority perspective, for not having any control. Everything's just kind of going willy-nilly. And I know people say that Congress needs to get involved. I mean, come on. When the federal government gets involved in anything, what tends to happen? It tends to not go well. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't think Congress is going to have the answer, but somebody has to, because the NCAA doesn't. But Cignetti is right. NIL in its current form is unsustainable. It is. It is. And something, you look, I mean, the games are going to continue to get played. But I really think that eventually the well is going to run dry when it comes to the NIL war chest, which is really just money coming from donors and flowing into the athletic departments, which is then, in turn, used to try to entice the top recruits. There has to be another way. There has to be maybe a spending cap. I don't know. Will there be a spending cap? There should be. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I think a spending cap would be nice. Saying, hey, you can spend, for example, I don't know, some budgets are in the neighborhood of $20 million. Let's bring it down. Down, I say. $10 million. That's the most you can spend on an NIL. And if you spend a penny more, there's going to be hefty consequences. Whether that's loss of scholarships, whether that's a fine. I don't know. But there has to be some sort of spending cap. Because all the coaches have pointed toward the budgets being way too high. That was what Mike Elko emphasized. Curt Cignetti saying college football can't survive like this. So bring the money down. That's got to be step one. As for the rest, I don't know. But I think it has to start with the players. I understand the players deserve to be compensated. I'm not saying that they don't. But I think that you're spending too much on some of these players to justify it. I don't care how good they are. These guys are making more in college, and they're choosing to stay in college because they would make less money, less guaranteed money, especially on a rookie contract in the NFL. That, to me, is a very, very telling sign, because it used to be that the ultimate goal of any college player was to make it to the NFL so that they could get paid. It's fine that you're getting paid in college, but you shouldn't be trying to stay in college like Trinidad Chambliss of Ole Miss, the quarterback, who sued for an extra year of eligibility and won, because he's going to make more money at Ole Miss this year than he would on a rookie contract in the NFL. That's not right. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on 98.7 The Zone. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Thanks so much for joining us on this final day of May. Tell you what, the month of May, what a great time to be in Central Indiana. I was not here a week ago. I was among about 350,000 others at the Indianapolis 500-mile race. It was fun. I sat in the Northwest Vista, the entrance to turn 4. And just incredible. The rain did not stay away. I was hoping it would. We got some sprinkles, but despite the fact that about 50 laps were run under caution, we still got a thrilling finish. And I've been a lifelong race fan. I've seen a lot of great races. And that finish was probably the coolest thing I've seen in any racing event in person ever. Ever. Because I correctly predicted that David Malukas made his move too early when he took the lead going into turn 1. And I understand both schools of thought on this. One, if you're Malukas, you're probably thinking, man, I'd love to be out in front if the field wrecks behind me, because if the caution comes out after the white flag has come out, the race is over. So let me get to the lead. But Felix Rosenqvist, how in the world did he and Marcus Armstrong not collide? I have no idea. Teammates side by side for pretty much the entire lap, and somehow they didn't wreck. Insane. Unbelievable car placement. Unbelievable touch by both of them. Rosenqvist, the courage that you have to send it around the outside of your teammate like that, and the trust you have to have in your teammate to know that they won't wreck in that situation. I mean, holy cow. And then the run that he got out of turn 4, he passed Malukas on the way up to the line, winning by 0.03 of a second. Incredible. Just incredible. The 500 is like no other. It is unbelievable. And I know that there are detractors. There are people who say, hey, it's just driving in circles. No, it's not. There is so much more to oval racing than just turning left. And anybody who's ever even played a NASCAR video game or sim raced, maybe, if you're somebody who likes to dabble into iRacing, anybody will tell you there is so much more to oval racing than just turning left. And the IMS isn't even an oval, it's a rectangle. Rectangle racing, if you'd like. It's such a unique track in that way. It's so unique. Because, I mean, there's just nothing like it. The drafting there is unbelievable. The dirty air is crazy. That's one of the things that I found out the hard way in iRacing when it comes to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, is that when you're behind somebody, when you're in their draft, yes, obviously you've got less wind resistance, so you will go faster in a straight line. But when you get into the corners, the turbulent air makes the car so difficult to control because it just wants to skate. It wants to slide. It's like you're driving on ice on Walnut Street here in Bloomington. You can't control the front end. You've got to constantly tweak the balance of the car. You're constantly fighting the wheel. You've got to save your tires. You got to lift going into corners, but you can't lift too much because if you do, you're going to lose time. I mean, there is so much that these drivers have to do. And I will always be a racing fan. But one of my friends said that he said it well, that going to the IMS, going to the Indy 500 rekindles your love for racing every time, no matter how often you go. It is unreal. It is unreal. And I'm so glad that I was able to go. I went to the race when I graduated high school, went after I graduated college. So it's and both times I've gone, a Swedish driver has won. Marcus Ericsson in 22, Rosenqvist in 26. So maybe the Swedish embassy needs to send me a gift basket or an IKEA gift card or something. I don't know. Because both years I've gone, a Swedish driver has won, which I think is it's once is nice, twice is, well, maybe a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. So if I go next year and Rosenqvist goes back to back, I'll say, hey, Sweden, you're welcome. I'll take that IKEA gift card in the mail if you'd like. But no, the Indy 500 is incredible. It is incredible. This is the last IU Sports Sunday show here on 98.7 The Zone. This is a show that I mentioned in the first segment started as a LinkedIn message in July of 2024. And the story behind that is in the spring of 2023, I took a sportscasting class with Jeremy Gray of IU Athletics. He is the PA announcer at basketball games. He does a whole host of other things. Very active in engaging the fan base on social media, things of that nature. And Jeremy put in a word with Kent Sterling. Kent was looking, as I recall, for a student to potentially host a show. And Jeremy put in my name into the mix. And at that time, I was a sophomore. I had just come off my first, I call it my first full year of student media. The summer prior, I interned in Cary, North Carolina with USA Baseball as a broadcast intern. Came back, did men's soccer on student radio, WIUX, got to call the Big Ten Championship. That was fun. That was actually one of my favorite broadcasts during my time at IU. And I called a ton of games. I don't have the exact numbers between my internships and the games that I did on campus and on the road. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 games is how many I did at IU. But Jeremy put in a word. I was coming off a year where I had really started to get comfortable doing soccer on student radio. I did women's soccer on Big Ten Plus. I called women's basketball on student radio, did baseball on student radio as well. I had covered men's soccer. I covered baseball for the second year running, which ended in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the Knoxville Regional, covering IU as they got the snot beaten out of them by the eventual national champion Tennessee Volunteers, led by Tony Vitello. And I got a LinkedIn message from Kent Sterling asking if I would be interested in hosting a show. And, you know, I had never really thought about doing talk radio. It wasn't something that I had considered. Sometimes I'd listen to the radio on the way to school in high school, maybe on the way home. I don't know. But I never considered doing a show, and I figured, well, why not? Give it a shot. Maybe I'm terrible. Maybe I'm decent. I don't know. So entering that school year, which would have been the fall of 2024, coinciding with the arrival of a certain football coach from James Madison, I started this show. It was I don't think we officially got up and running until September, actually. So it would have been September of 2024. So we were a couple weeks into football season. But we did the show, and I was thinking, okay, I could get used to this. The one thing that I'm still, admittedly, I don't think I ever got used to, was waking up before 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning as a college student. And I know for normal adults, right, that's not that early, waking up before 8 a.m., but for somebody like me who avoided 8 a.m. classes like the plague, I never took an 8 a.m. in college. The earliest class I took was 9:35. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to handle that, to be able to wake up that early on a Sunday and to do this show. But I'm so glad I did. I am so glad that I did, because it gave me a new way to find my voice in sports media and to find something that I enjoy doing, to find something that I think I'm pretty good at. It got me a job, and I can't thank Kent Sterling enough for that. Got me a job at 107.5 The Fan in Indianapolis, which is where I've been. I ran the board for JMV on Friday. The Ride with JMV, which is their flagship afternoon drive show. And I've gotten to meet and reintroduce myself to some really cool people. I already knew James Boyd, already knew Jake Query, but getting to meet them again and to work alongside them is very cool. Kevin Bowen, he and I are both Cathedral High School grads, and none of that would have happened without this show. And sure, we've ruffled some feathers. I've ruffled some feathers. I say we. I'm the only one here. I'm doing this entirely by myself. I've done it entirely by myself from day one. And I've ruffled some feathers along the way, no doubt about it. The SEC doesn't particularly like me. I think I'm kind of persona non grata down in the Southeast, which, hey, that's a badge I'm willing to wear with pride. I'm absolutely willing to wear that with pride. But it's been fun. It has been a very fun experience hosting this show. It's been a very, very important experience, I think, over the course of my development in sports media. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I've I've been able to express myself in a way that I think suits me very well, because I'm somebody who enjoys just talking about things that I'm interested in. I'm somebody that enjoys expressing my opinions, and I am very opinionated. And if you know me, then you know that. You know that I can get fired up about anything and take a stance on it. And if you agree, if you disagree, that's fine. But being able to have that outlet in a way that very few college students do. I'm not a college student anymore, but I started this show as a junior in college. Being able to have that outlet and being able to build my portfolio in a new way and to build my brand in a new way and to share this time over the last, well, not quite 2 years, but over the last 20 months or so. Being able to share this time on the air with all of you has been amazing. And it stinks that it's ending. It does. Because, I mean, college as a whole, it's the best 4 years of your life. And for me, well, it ended on a random Saturday in early May. I just graduated. Hey, you're done. Thanks for playing. You're not coming back. And it's so weird. Because when you're in it, it feels like it goes forever. And the way that I thought about time in college was that the days took a long time. The months took a while, but the weeks flew by. That's the way I always saw it, especially when I was covering football the last 2 years, because you knew you had something to look forward to every single weekend. And when you're in the moment, when you're working those long days at Memorial Stadium, walking up and down the stairs, that terrible press box, or shooting a game on the field, cramped on the sidelines, whatever it is, or you're covering a game at Assembly Hall, and calling that basketball the last few years would be very generous. But whatever you're doing, whatever I was doing in student media, calling a game on WIUX, going to Franklin Hall to pick up the equipment at odd hours of the night just to make sure I didn't have to wake up early and get it in the morning. Whatever it is, it seems like it's taking forever in the moment. Driving down to Knoxville to cover IU baseball, driving to Chicago to fly to Eugene, Oregon to cover IU football, whatever it is. You look up one day and you're like, holy crap, it's over. Just like that. And you look up and you've done so many awesome things. But it all happened in a flash, it seems. And it's incredible. It's incredible. I still haven't processed the fact that I'm not coming back to IU in the fall. I don't like it, because in my mind, I am coming back to IU in the fall. But I'm not. It's over. We're done. This show is done after today. I've got 1 hour and 16 minutes left. 1 hour and 16 minutes. That's it. That's not a lot of time. But I think I get it now. And I wish I would have taken this advice sooner when it comes to my parents and other adults telling me, hey, don't be in such a rush to grow up. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? Being an adult seems awesome. I don't want to be a kid. I want to do stuff. I want to go places. But I think they were right. I think they were right. Yeah. And it sounds cliche. And I hate the saying that it's a cliche, because it is. Because, I mean, yeah, that's like I don't know. It's kind of self-serving. I don't know if that's the right adjective. But I don't like it. But it's true. It's true. Cliches are cliches because they are very common, almost universal experiences or mindsets, right? And I wish that I could go back to when I moved into Forest Hall my freshman year at IU in 2022. And if I could just tell myself from now, almost 5 years ago, or I guess 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Not good at math. It'll be 5 years before I know it, but the idea that, hey, savor every second, because it is going to fly by. I wish I could tell myself that. This show has flown by. We're already almost an hour in. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on 98.7 The Zone. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. One thing that I am very surprised about. I did not think that this show would end before IU baseball made a coaching change. But that seems like it's going to happen. They haven't announced anything. Unless I've been taken off the media list. No, I have not. They have not announced a coaching change. I am shocked. I honestly am shocked. With the way that this season has gone and with the way this season went and with the way the last two seasons really have gone, I am very surprised that IU has not made a coaching change on the baseball side. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe are they waiting for the College World Series to end? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? I feel like generally speaking, when it comes to coaching changes, you make them as soon as possible so that you have as much time as possible to find a successful candidate to take over. And I guess it's not going to happen. So I guess Jeff Mercer has one more year. I mean, that's the only conclusion I can make. Mercer at the helm of Indiana baseball just closed his 7th full season. COVID did, of course, not allow the 2020 season to play out. But he took over in 2019, won the Big Ten, won Coach of the Year, went to the NCAA tournament in 19, 23, and 24, but has not been to the NCAA tournament since 2024 when Indiana got bounced by Tennessee and Southern Miss in Knoxville. And Indiana 2026 was their worst season of Mercer's tenure. 23-31 overall, 9-21 in the Big Ten. And it's not just that they were 9-21 in the league. 300. 30% winning percentage, not very good in conference play. It's not just that. It's the way they lost some of those games, not even just the Big Ten games. I mean, we've rehashed that so many times on this show, I'm not going to go over it, but suffice it to say they found new and creative ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And with some of the things that I heard about the program, about the culture and about the way the players view Jeff Mercer, I'm very, very surprised that he has not been fired. Very surprised. But that makes the calculus very simple going into 2027 for IU baseball. Win or you're done. That's it. That's it. That has to be it. Because they can't have this go on for much longer. The one game that I went to in person this year here in Bloomington was the Saturday game between Indiana and Minnesota. The players being introduced got nice cheers. Jeff Mercer did not. That, I think, captures the fan base's sentiment. And I know, with respect to social media, it's kind of a vocal minority of fans. But it seems to me like everybody has had enough. And look, Jeff Mercer's a great recruiter. He's a great guy. I understand that. Covered him for 3 years. I get it. I get it. Nobody gives more long-winded interview answers than that guy. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. My friends and I, we would jokingly bet on, we didn't actually bet on it, but we would speculate on how long the press conference would go, and usually the over-under was set at 13 minutes. And you wouldn't get to ask as many questions as you'd think in those 13 minutes. But the bottom line is, Jeff Mercer has underachieved relative to the talent on this roster the last couple of years. And I guess Scott Dolson is thinking, well, Mercer, by and large, has still been pretty successful. 3 NCAA tournaments. He won 40 games in 2023, a whole bunch of draft picks, yada, yada, yada. I will counter that by saying the job of a college coach is not to get players to the professional ranks. It is to win. And if anything, the likes of Devin Taylor, Corbin Dickerson, Luke Sennard, Connor Foley, I could go on. There are more. Trust me, there are more. But those are the guys that come to mind right now. The likes of those guys and more being drafted, some of them very highly. Sennard, Dickerson, Taylor in particular, top 5 rounds, I think, for all of them. Makes it even more puzzling how he hasn't been more successful. Now, Luke Sennard is the exception because he was out for all of 2024 recovering from surgery. So he gets a pass. But the fact that Indiana had Devin Taylor and Corbin Dickerson in the same outfield and they didn't make the NCAA tournament is frankly egregious. That was 2025. Jake Hanley is going to be a very highly drafted player next year, first base. He hasn't played in an NCAA tournament game, and that's a crime. Jake Hanley is the Lamar Wilkerson, if you will, of IU baseball. Very talented player on an underachieving team with a bad coach. That's what I think. That's what I believe to be true. And I really think that next year it's going to be win or you're out for Jeff Mercer. That's the only prediction I have because I feel like if they were going to make the coaching change, they would have done it already. especially after the way they collapsed against Purdue. Multiple games in a row. The way they collapsed against North Carolina in the series finale. We could do this for hours, but we're not going to. The bottom line is Jeff Mercer has to be done if next year does not go the way that Scott Dolson wants it to go. Because IU baseball should be better. Should be better than they are. But Mercer has shown over the last couple of years that he might not be the guy to lead this program moving forward. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Thanks so much for joining us. 1 hour down, 1 to go. Flew by. It flew by. This whole show has flown by from the first time I did it, which was back in September of 2024. I believe it was around the time Indiana beat Western Illinois. Whew. A lot has changed since then. Kurt Cignetti talking about what he thinks of the current NIL landscape a couple of days ago, making waves around the college football landscape, as does anything that he says or does. So I'm not surprised there. We have some dates for IU basketball as well. Their games against Syracuse and Kentucky now have real, honest-to-God dates on the calendar. Syracuse, Monday, November 9th at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Kentucky, originally supposed to be played in December, November 20th at Lucas Oil Stadium. That's a Friday. That is the day before Indiana football goes to Washington. Classic Big Ten rivalry. Hoosiers versus Huskies in Seattle. Sure, why not? Why not? I am kind of disappointed in the fact that neither of those games, Syracuse and Kentucky, this year will be played in Bloomington. And I know the Kentucky scheduling has more to do with Coach Cal being scared of Assembly Hall than it does anything else, and I get that. But I wish that Syracuse, at least, could have been at Assembly Hall or at Syracuse. Play the good games on campus. Please. It's best for the sport. And you've seen this in college football all the time. Especially now. All these good games being played at neutral sites. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. We need on-campus games back. It shouldn't be controversial. I mean, look, you can say that IU Syracuse is a neutral site, but come on, it's Gainbridge. New York, Indiana. The game is being played in Indiana. It's not rocket science. That's going to be an IU home game. Also, it's a Monday night. You're not going to entice people to fly in on a random week in November. Or at least if you are. I mean, kudos to you for having that much flexibility in your schedule, I guess. I don't know. I wish that we got Syracuse and Kentucky both in on-campus arenas this year. I don't even care about them being in Bloomington. I know that Kentucky's going to come here, I think, in 28. I think. I don't know. It's either 27 or 28. The bottom line is it's annoying. It's annoying. And I wish that we had more of these good games on campus, man. Because the students are what make the atmosphere. The students are what make these games great. And it's a shame that that's not going to be the case for Syracuse or Kentucky. But hey, at least Indiana is taking the challenge of difficult non-conference opponents. At least power conference non-conference opponents. That is a step in the right direction. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Welcome back to IU Sports Sunday here on 98.7 The Zone. Nick Rotacap with you. Had to pass along a station ID there to get to the top of the hour. So this is it. As Michael Jackson said once upon a time, this is it. Shout out the This Is It CD. I had got that at a very young age. Put me on to the King of Pop, and that was a very, very prized possession. I got a lot of physical media sitting around at my house. A lot of vinyls, CDs, old school stuff. I'm a fan. I was talking about just a moment ago how we have some dates set for IU Syracuse and IU Kentucky. The IU Kentucky game, that's going to be a big weekend in Indiana sports. Not just in IU athletics, but also the state of Indiana. Because that weekend in late November, you've got the following. Colts-Texans on Thursday Night Football on the 19th. IU Kentucky basketball at Lucas Oil Stadium on the 20th. Colts Texans is in Houston, so you won't have to worry about back-to-back days at Lucas Oil Stadium. Colts Texans in Houston on Thursday. IU Kentucky at Lucas Oil on Friday. IU football at Washington on Saturday. Holy smokes. That's going to be big. And I think when you look at IU football's schedule for 2026, I think that a lot of people have rightfully circled the 3-week stretch of Nebraska, Ohio State, and Michigan in Lincoln, in Bloomington, and in Ann Arbor, respectively. That is going to be probably the most pivotal 3-game stretch of the season. You've also then got USC and Washington in back-to-back weeks in November. USC in Bloomington, Washington, and Seattle. IU could, I say worst case scenario, lose all 5 of those games. That is possible. And I think that, yes, the Cinderella run, no, they're not a Cinderella. Yes, the magical run that ended in a national championship for IU football is something worth keeping in mind. Because before last season, I think a lot of people thought the floor was 9-3, and maybe the ceiling was 11-1, but there was no way that they could win all 12, and they did. And I will acknowledge that because it is really, really hard to execute and to scheme at that high of a level and have that much success week in and week out over the course of a season. And that is what leads me to be skeptical of IU's chance to do the same in 2026, because you look at the schedule when it comes to the difficult games, and there are more of them, and there are more of them on the road. And I think that's the key. I mean, shoot, even Rutgers in Piscataway, you never know. You never know with road games. And I know Rutgers isn't good at managing money or playing football. They're about $500 million in debt, last I heard. I get that. I get that they're not good at football. But it's a road game. And again, IU was a feel-good story at this time last year, but there was no way that Cignetti could even replicate what he did in 2024, right? I mean, Notre Dame humbled them. Notre Dame showed them what a real team looks like in this state. I'm being sarcastic in case you can't tell, but man, Notre Dame, they are not going to let that rest, that they are the last team to beat Indiana, even though that version of Indiana has not existed since that fateful night in December of 2024, when I was still a junior at Indiana University. I have now graduated from Indiana University. That's how long it's been since IU football lost a game. They're going to have a target on their back everywhere they go. Nebraska, tough place to play. I know Matt Rule's not a very good coach. We've established that. Cignetti has stuffed him in a locker once. But you never know with those road games. Ohio State coming to Bloomington, they probably got the most steam coming out of their ears out of anybody after the Big Ten championship game last year. Julian Sayin now has a full season of starting experience under his belt. Jeremiah Smith is still the best receiver in the country until further notice. Ohio State's going to be a different team. They had a lot of guys get drafted. Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Carnell Tate, Caden Curry getting picked up by the Colts. I was surprised that he was on the board as long as he was. Sonny Styles. All right, I think I already mentioned Sonny Styles. If I didn't, Sonny Styles. A lot of players. It's going to be a different team. But Ryan Day probably wants to beat Indiana more than anybody, because there were other factors at play, the departure of Brian Hartline heading to South Florida and others. But Ohio State losing that Big Ten championship game sent them in sort of a downward spiral and showed that they weren't invincible. Michigan at the Big House. Kyle Whittingham, stopgap head coach. Michigan has not been at the top of their game since they won a national championship a couple of years back. Or 2023, I guess. The 2023 season, the start of 2024. But Michigan at the Big House, that's 110,000 people who want to see you lose. I'm sure IU will have a decent contingent, but it's going to be overwhelmingly Michigan fans. At least I would expect that. USC. Under Lincoln Riley, usually one of the best offenses in the country. Jade Mayava at quarterback. Great quarterback. Very experienced. He's been successful. That's going to be a tough game. Washington and Seattle, that place gets loud. That place gets really loud. And maybe Cignetti going up there and facing a team that wears purple, it'll remind him of James Madison maybe. I don't know. And you remember what happened on the first play from scrimmage when Washington played Indiana in 2024. I don't know if it was the first play was it the first play from scrimmage? Or was it the second play from scrimmage? Because I believe the first play from scrimmage in that game was a sack. Will Rogers, who was told to be there at 4:30. And if you get that reference, you are one among very few. That was a fun little wrinkle. College Game Day was here. That was amazing. That was awesome. I believe it was the second play from scrimmage. Taven Jackson started that game for Indiana. And we'll look at the drive. Will Rogers was sacked. Then there was a false start. And then there was a short completion on 2nd and 23. And then intentional grounding and then a punt. So I stand corrected, actually. It was the second drive on the first play. Or it wasn't even the first play from scrimmage. Man, for some reason in my mind, this was the first play from scrimmage. But it was not. It was halfway through the first quarter, so I'm way off. It's the play you remember the most from that game. Indiana-Washington 2024. Roll out the big red carpet. D'Angelo Pons. Pick 6. 67 yards to the house. So, Jed Fish probably still remembers that. Not very fondly. But that's what happened the last time Indiana and Washington faced off. And still, that was an ugly game. It was 31-17. The absence of Curtis Rourke was sorely felt. This time around, it's at Washington's house, Husky Stadium. Like I said, that place gets loud. It is a beautiful stadium. And I really wish that I was still a student so I would have a chance to cover that game because that place looks amazing. The one thing I'm interested in keeping tabs on is how DeMond Williams Jr. plays this year. Because the quarterback for Washington, who was the backup when Washington played here in 2024, DeMond Williams wanted to transfer out. And Washington basically said, hey, you signed an NIL contract. We're going to sue you if you leave. Something to that effect. It was a very, very odd situation. DeMond Williams announced in January that he was going to enter the transfer portal. But he had just signed a contract reportedly worth approximately $4 million for this coming season, 2026. He was looking to go to LSU. But on two fronts, he was stonewalled. One, it was probably going to be a breach of that contract, which would have led to some sort of legal ramifications. And two, the Big Ten was prepared to stop the transfer, as was the University of Washington. It was very, very odd. He basically said, hey guys, I'm leaving. Bye. I'm chasing a bag at LSU, $4 million. See you on the other side. Oh, wait a minute. I can't leave. All right, guys, I'm coming back. I'm going to be the leader of this offense. And his announcement of his return was at a very, very bad time. He announced on Instagram that he was, quote, fully committed to Washington and focused on contributing to the Huskies' future. This announcement took place during a celebration of life for a Washington women's soccer player who had just passed away from cancer. Active women's soccer player who passed away from cancer. Washington made the College Cup around the time of her passing. Mia Hamant was her name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right. Hamant, Hamant. It was a very highly publicized story in the fall. Washington went on this magical run for her, very emotional. DeMond Williams announced his return to the team during Mia Hamant's celebration of life, which was attended by a lot of his teammates. He was not there. So DeMond Williams, suffice it to say, likely burned a lot of his goodwill with not just his teammates, but also the Washington fans. He later apologized and said that he got bad advice and said the decision was a mistake entering the transfer portal or trying to enter the transfer portal. Thanking his teammates and coaches for accepting him back. But you know that there's going to be something in the back of their minds saying, hey, this guy didn't want to be here. He wanted to leave. Jedd Fisch, the head coach, saying that he and Williams would work together to repair relationships and regain the trust of the Washington community. LSU ultimately landing Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. Good luck. Good luck with Lane Kiffin. Good luck. But that's a very interesting storyline that I'm going to be keeping tabs on throughout the season from afar. DeMond Williams Jr., the quarterback for Washington. But Indiana's schedule this year, getting back on topic, I mean, you look at this top to bottom. North Texas, that kickoff time announced, big noon kickoff. So set your alarms for 12:15 Eastern, because that's what time that game's going to start. It's not going to start at noon. Big noon ruins everything they touch. It stinks. Howard on BTN, September 12th at noon. Western Kentucky on Peacock, 4 p.m., kind of an odd start time. Usually it's either noon, 3:30, or 7:30, but 4 p.m. on Peacock as the Hilltoppers come to town. Northwestern on Friday night, September 25th, 8 p.m. on Fox. Oof. My student media friends will not get home until about 1 a.m. that night. 8 p.m. kick. Followed up Saturday at 8 p.m., Rutgers and Piscataway, October 3rd. Network not announced for that one yet. And then Nebraska on the road, Ohio State at home, Michigan on the road in back-to-back weeks. And that's the thing about IU football that scares me. Their bye week is not until November. It's not until November 7th, after they return home from the Big House and play Minnesota. So you're looking at 2 months' worth of games without a game off. And I know Cignetti is a maestro when it comes to coaching and preparation. I know that by virtue of him keeping the practices light, which is something that he has been very open about, they don't do a lot of physical stuff in practice throughout the week. It's focused on recovery. It's focused on scheming. It's focused on the mental side of things. I understand that, and that was a big part of why IU was able to stay healthier than other teams throughout the course of last season, and even still, they had some bad injury luck. Kellen Wyatt got hurt. Stephen Daly, his backup, got hurt. Celebrating. That was brutal. That was brutal. Indiana's defensive line was decimated by the end of the season. One of the reasons the Penn State game was so close is because the offensive line was so riddled by injuries. And that Wisconsin game on Senior Day, they were getting booed. Indiana was in the second quarter because they were coming off. That was their 6th consecutive game without a bye. And in the 2 weeks prior, they had played on the road in each of those 2 weeks. So you remember the end result because it was the ultimate prize. But Indiana's journey to that national championship was laborious at times, as it is for any team. I'm concerned about how long Indiana goes without a bye week, but I know Cignetti keeps them fresh throughout the season. It's just at some point, especially when you're playing that many games in consecutive weeks, slip-ups can happen. Slip-ups can happen. And it helps that USC is after the bye. It helps that Washington is the second game after the bye. And then you've got Purdue at home. That'll be good. But I would not be shocked if Indiana does not go 12-0. And that's a crazy thing to say. A crazy thing to say. But football is a brutal game. Indiana's going to have targets on its back all over from everybody they play, and that begins with former Indiana quarterback Taven Jackson in North Texas coming to town on September 5th. So I am very excited to see how Indiana handles being at the top of the college football world, a place where it has never been. It's hard to get to the top. It's hard to get to the pinnacle. It's even harder to stay there once everybody knows what you're about. I'm very intrigued to see how Josh Hoover, the transfer quarterback from TCU coming in, very intrigued to see how he handles it. This new look team, Turbo Richard at running back, Nick Marsh at wide receiver on the outside, Charlie Becker, now a known commodity. That's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun team. The defense, Bryant Haynes, talking about around the spring game, how this is the most talented defense that he's had. And you saw what he did last year. He won the Broyles Award for the nation's top assistant coach. So if this defense is more talented than last year's, this Indiana team might be one that plays a lot of lower scoring games. A lot of defensive battles where Indiana has to lean on the defense to win. You might see more games like the Big Ten Championship last year where it's 13-10, or the Iowa game where it's 20-15, 20-13 before Fernando Mendoza intentionally took a safety. And shoot, even the Oregon game, 30-20. It didn't feel like it was that high scoring because Oregon had a pick six. Indiana kicked a couple field goals. There wasn't, it wasn't an old school Pac-12 style shootout. It was a physical, hard-fought game. I think you're going to see more of that this year for Indiana football. Whatever it is, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun ride. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Got to say, my internal clock when it comes to radio is a little bit off right now because I'm working at 107.5 The Fan. The blocks are very structured. Everything's got to be on it. And there's so many different shows I've got to keep track of in my head now on the production side of things that I'm doing my own show. It's like, I've got to be out at 9:30. That's interesting. I've been doing this show for long enough. I should know. But you throw some more things into the mix and it becomes a little bit more difficult to follow, but we'll soldier on. It's a very, very good problem to have. And it stinks that this show is ending. But I've got to move on at some point. I want to go back to what Curt Cignetti was talking about at one of the IU Athletics sponsored events in Southern Indiana earlier this week. Talking about how the current NIL landscape is unsustainable. Unsustainable. And there's a common misconception, and I talked about this a little bit in the first hour, that when you look at the public records of a university's and an athletic department's financial reports, that included in the operating expenses is NIL money. It's not. That is not the case. But the bottom line is there is a lot of money being spent by college football programs. And Cignetti is right in that players deserve to be compensated. And I don't think anybody's arguing that. I think what people, myself included, have a problem with is what it's become with respect to pay for play, with respect to these transfer portal carousels every year where players are just hunting a bag. When it comes to those sorts of things, where you don't recognize your team's roster year over year, the entire roster is new, and because the entire roster is new, and because you've got to recruit 10, 20, 30 new players on the football side every year out of the transfer portal, because you've got to do that, you're asking a lot of people for a lot of money every year. And Mike Elko of Texas A&M talking about how if it keeps going from where we are, we're about 2.5 years away from having an NIL budget that's more than the TV revenue for all of our universities. And he's talking about Elko being Texas A&M's head coach, talking about the SEC. Elko continues saying, when that happens, we're going to have some serious questions about how that gets funded. And he's right. He's right. And I know the SEC may or may not have had players getting paid under the table for years before it was legal. I mean, you saw what happened with Johnny Manziel signing autographs, those sorts of things, which was illegal at the time. He should have been able to. He should have been compensated for it, but it was illegal. It was illegal. And it's, I don't know, it's just something has to be done. I think, first and foremost, they're not employees, so it's not a salary cap. But there needs to be a ceiling on how much players can make when it comes to NIL. Because right now, sometimes it can be a bidding war. And I think it's clear that Indiana is not interested in bidding wars. I think that is very clear. Because you look at the highest valued, you look at the highest touted, the most coveted transfer targets, Indiana's not going for all of them. They're not. Because Cignetti doesn't care about stars. He doesn't care about your ego. He doesn't care about your value. He cares about what you can do in his system. He cares about if you're a culture fit, if you're a character fit. And he recruits, and he's talked about this, he recruits high character players. And that was one of the things that made this team, 2025, so successful, was their character, their work ethic, their buy-in. And that's something that you heard people across the country talk about throughout the season, is how the level of buy-in into this scheme and into Cignetti's approach was unprecedented. It's very difficult to get players to all buy into the same thing. It is. It is. Because sometimes you're going to have guys who, if they don't play the role that they wanted to play, then they're going to be frustrated and they're going to check out and they're not going to give their best. But Cignetti somehow kept everybody on the same page the entire season. And talking to the players week in and week out, you got that impression. Everybody thought the same way. So that's why when you look at some of these highly touted transfers that cost the most money, IU's not in the mix. Ho-hum. They're going to be fine either way. They are going to be fine either way. I think that is the sentiment from fans who actually know what they're talking about. But some writers and some haters and naysayers do not know what they are talking about. And people saying that, oh, it's ironic that the guy who's bankrolled by Mark Cuban gets to sound the alarm on how unsustainable NIL is. And look, it is true that the rise of Indiana football coincided with the proliferation of NIL at a national level. But the thing is, Indiana was investing in football before Cignetti got here. The investment began, by all accounts, in 2021 as soon as NIL was legalized. I think the problem was that at the time, pre-Cignetti, under Tom Allen, those 3 years of NIL that they had under Allen, it was not utilized correctly. The resources were not properly allocated. And that goes back to the idea that I expressed in the first hour, that it's one thing to have the money. It's one thing to have the resources, of which money is one. It's another thing to use those resources in a proper way. I mean, you look at Texas Tech. Oil money coming in from every which way. Or as Stewie Griffin would say, every which way. Every which way. So much money. Texas Tech spending from all angles, trying to buy the best roster. And they did it again this year. They tried it last year. It didn't work. They played Oregon in the Orange Bowl, and their offense was just anemic. Just anemic. They couldn't do anything. I remember watching that game in the press box in Pasadena, and it looked like Texas Tech was trying to push a boulder up Mount Everest every time they had the ball. Their defense was great. Their offense was terrible. So it's one thing to spend the money on the talent. It's another thing to get that talent to play cohesively at a high level. That second part is the difference. And Cignetti was doing this and is doing this with guys who, on one hand, if they entered the transfer portal, anybody could have recruited them. It's not like he's bringing in guys from some secret underground factory of football players that only he has access to. Elijah Surratt was a 0-star recruit when he joined Cignetti at James Madison. He was nothing. He was nothing. But he developed under Curt Cignetti. He took a gamble on his career by following him to Indiana, as did many others. D'Angelo Pons was another one. Everybody said D'Angelo Pons was too small. He's only 5'9". He's only 170 or so pounds. He can't play on the outside. Brian Haynes says, phooey. He absolutely can. And he'll lock up your number one receiver while doing it. And look, I know that Jeremiah Smith got D'Angelo Ponds a couple times in the Big Ten Championship. Hey, guess what? Jeremiah Smith is also an elite athlete. And you know what? Jeremiah Smith did lead all receivers in that game, in the Big Ten Championship. I think he ended up with over 100 yards. But about 50 of those came at the end of the game on a Julian Sayin Hail Mary pass that ultimately meant nothing. In fact, I think it bears repeating. By and large, D'Angelo Ponds did a phenomenal job on Jeremiah Smith in that game. And remember, Jeremiah Smith is a physical freak. He is extremely gifted, athletically speaking. He is unbelievably talented, and he will have a very long career playing on Sundays. You look at Jeremiah Smith's stats, 8 receptions, 144 yards on D'Angelo Ponds in the Big Ten Championship game. But you go to the fourth quarter, you go to the final play. Julian Sayin, a Hail Mary pass to Jeremiah Smith for 46 yards. That was meaningless. It did nothing to impact the outcome of the game. You take that out, Jeremiah Smith, 7 receptions, 98 yards. No touchdowns on D'Angelo Ponds. It's a pretty good game. Especially considering, again, D'Angelo Ponds kept Jeremiah Smith out of the end zone. Hey, he couldn't do it. He's too small. He can't play. He's not going to get drafted. Oh, he's a second-round NFL draft pick. I'm just getting word that he's going to the New York Jets along with Omar Cooper. Omar Cooper, who was recruited by, not Curt Cignetti, notably, recruited by Tom Allen out of Lawrence North High School. Go Wildcats. I'm a Cathedral grad, so that's kind of my neck of the woods over there. But this idea that Indiana just brought in a bunch of hired guns, pay top dollar for them, that's just not true. That is factually incorrect. Factually incorrect. It is not true. It is not true. And sure, yes, NIL helped Indiana land some transfers. I'm not going to argue that. Money is a factor. That's the way it goes across the sport. Money helps a lot of schools land a lot of transfers. But Cignetti won with a mix of transfers and guys that nobody else would have thought twice about. That's what I'm trying to get across. That, yes, Cignetti had to spend money. Everybody has to spend money. That's the name of the game. Just because you play the game does not mean that you are a fan of the system. It's what you have to do. I bet Cignetti views NIL as a necessary evil, because without it, he wouldn't have a chance of competing. That's just how it goes, and that's not the way it should be. Let me make that clear. I don't think that the current system we have is a good system, where the budgets just keep going up, teams keep asking for money, the spending just keeps increasing. Pay for play so brazenly should not be the way this works. The players deserve to be compensated, but not in this manner. Because we need a spending cap. We do. It cannot just be a series of bidding wars in the offseason. That's one of the reasons that Texas Tech has a lot of hype again this year, is because they spent a ton of money. Whether or not Joey McGuire can win is another story. But I do respect, by the way, just an aside here, what Joey McGuire and Texas Tech are doing. Steve Sarkisian, the Texas head coach, the Longhorns, talked about how he thinks Texas Tech plays a schedule so soft that the Texas Longhorns could beat Texas Tech's opponents with their backups and their third stringers. So the Red Raiders down in Lubbock offered to Texas, hey, we will buy out your Week 1 game against Ohio State, and we will buy out our Week 1 game against Abilene Christian. Let's play each other. Let's play each other. Let's do it. If you want to talk, then let's play each other. Since you think that your backups and your third stringers, their week 1 game against Texas State, I beg your pardon. Texas Ohio State is week 2. So check that. Check that. That's week 1 we're talking about here. Texas plays Texas State. Texas Tech plays Abilene Christian. Steve Sarkisian offered by Joey McGuire, hey, Texas, we'll buy out your week 1 game, we'll buy out our week 1 game, and we'll play each other if you want to settle this. I respect that. I respect Texas Tech, and I respect Joey McGuire for that. For putting their money where their mouth is. For hearing somebody talk down on them and saying, no, we're not going to take that. If you think that you guys are so much better, come prove it. I respect that. Because I think Cignetti was the same way. Curt Cignetti. Hey, Alabama, if you think the big, bad SEC is so much better than Indiana, Indiana's got a bunch of nobodies. Alabama's full of freak athletes, big dudes, lots of money, lots of history. Hey, come play us and prove how much bigger and badder the SEC is. Oh, I'm getting word that happened in the Rose Bowl and Indiana won 38-3. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Because on paper, Alabama's roster probably about the same or better than Indiana. So why did Indiana win by 35 points? Now, bear with me here. What if coaching matters? Now, I know that's controversial. I'm being sarcastic. Coaching matters. Coaching matters. NIL is a factor, but just because you spend the money does not mean that you will have success. And I think, if anything, it's good that Cignetti and other coaches are the ones now sounding the alarm on NIL, are the ones ringing the bell about how unsustainable this system is. Because they are the ones whose words hold the most weight at the end of the day. They are the ones whose words matter the most because they know as much about it as anyone else. They know the most because they are entrenched in it on a day-to-day basis. So if they are the ones who have to sound the alarm for change to be made, go for it. I don't care about your moral grandstanding talking about how hypocritical they are. Who cares? They have to play the cards they are dealt. It's like ragging on the players when they're playing cupcake opponents. The players cannot control who they play. All they can control is how they play, how they respond to adversity over the course of a game and a season. That's all they can control. In that same vein, the coaches cannot directly control the system, but they can offer their input. And in the meantime, all they can do is play the cards they are dealt. If the system requires you to spend indiscriminate amounts of money, then you got to do it. But that doesn't mean that they have to be okay with it in the long run. And I think that's the difference. But that requires nuance, and there's not a lot of that on social media these days. So, if you hear somebody talking about how much of a hypocrite Cignetti is, like certain writers, who I will not name, because I don't like witch hunts. I've had witch hunts on me. It's not fun. People going after you. I've had plenty of that. But whenever you see people saying stuff like that, Indiana with hired guns, mercenaries, old men, retirement home, roster, 26-year-olds, whatever, just know they live in their own echo chamber where if you repeat something enough, it's true to you, and that makes it true, fact, indisputable, even when it's not. It's not worth your time. The fact of the matter is the system needs changed. Cignetti is probably the single most powerful voice in college football right now, one of the most powerful voices in sports right now, given his success. And so, his words carry weight. And he is sounding the alarm. That means that in the long run, college football will hopefully be better off because hopefully that'll help be a catalyst for meaningful change that will allow us to enjoy this sport that we all love so much. Forever, ideally. But for a much longer time than, say, Mike Elko's proposed 2.5 years when it comes to the budgets going up year after year. Change is good. How we get to that change is with the folks with the most power and the most weight in their voices doing the talking. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on 98.7 The Zone. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. And Brendan Sorsby will no longer be with us in college football. I don't think he's going to die. I should have phrased that better. His college football career, though, is dead. The NCAA says Brendan Sorsby's college football career should end for gambling on his own team. This story coming from ESPN's David Purdom yesterday. Purdom begins the story. Brendan Sorsby, of course, the former Indiana quarterback who was embroiled in a quarterback controversy with Taven Jackson in 2023. Gosh, Indiana football was in the trenches. Do you remember Week 1, 2023, Indiana, Ohio State? Tom Allen wouldn't name a starter between Sorsby and Jackson because he didn't want to give the Buckeyes a competitive edge. With that coaching and with that supporting cast, I think Indiana could have wheeled out prime Peyton Manning and Ohio State still would have won. And I'm not joking. Oh, that was bad. The NCAA filing its opposition to Brendan Sorsby's request for a preliminary injunction that would allow him to play at Texas Tech amidst his eligibility being stripped after he was found to have placed bets on Indiana football while he was here in Bloomington. It gets worse, though. It gets worse. The NCAA does not want to be forced to become the first major American sports league to allow an athlete who bet on their own games to continue to compete. They don't want that. And it isn't just that Sorsby was betting on IU football while he was in Bloomington, because the initial report was that he placed bets on games in which he did not play, which were in 2022 during his redshirt freshman season. But it goes deeper. It goes deeper. And this is a guy who needs help. And I hate that there are a lot of the frat bro types who will just dismiss this as, oh, he's one of us, free him. No. Brendan Sorsby, not only is it a gambling addiction, and that is a personal issue that he needs to tackle, and I refuse to believe that a very brief stint in an inpatient clinic is going to help him with that, or has helped him with that. It is a massive question of competitive integrity, and it is yet another example of why gambling is so bad in its current state when it comes to sports. Being able to wager on sports from your phone should not be a reality, and I will die on that hill. And I know I'm going against the grain of a lot of people my age when I say this, but it absolutely and unequivocally is a stain on society. Sports betting in its current state is a net negative, and it's not even close. Brendan Sorsby transferred at least $60,000 to friends to place bets on his behalf. At least 2,900 bets were placed while he was here in Bloomington at IU for more than $30,000. Over the course of a month, from September to October of 2022, which would have been his redshirt freshman season at IU, he placed 40 bets on IU football totaling at least $850. From October 22 to November of 23, he placed at least 50 bets on Indiana basketball. From September of 22 to December of 23, Sorsby placed 300 bets on college football, totaling at least $6,500. He also admits, Brendan Sorsby does, that he placed one or two of the three bets on Cincinnati hoops through his account for $3,500. And while at Texas Tech in Lubbock, so this is very, very recent, he transferred money to other people to bet on his behalf. Sports betting is illegal in Texas. You can play daily fantasy, but you cannot bet on sports like you can, say, in Indiana through an app like FanDuel or DraftKings or Bet365 or whatever. Brendan Sorsby transferred money to other people to bet on his behalf in a state where sports betting is illegal. He wagered on IU football while he was a member of the team. Remember, a couple weeks ago, it was reported by On3, he bet on IU football in 22 to, quote, feel more connected with the team. Sorsby said, I rationalized placing these bets as a way to feel more connected with the team, to root for my friends, and feel like I had a real stake in the games I was not otherwise involved in. He later added, because the Indiana football team was not a very strong competitor in 2022, I lost most of the bets I placed. And I know there's a joke in there about how betting on IU football in the last years of Tom Allen should be punishable in its own right. I do see the humor in those jokes. The core idea is this. Sports betting is a cancer on society. It will likely cost Brendan Sorsby a massive payday from Texas Tech and the final year of his college career. Keep in mind, he's also being sued by Cincinnati for breaking his contract there to go to Texas Tech to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million as the nation's top transfer quarterback. Which, by the way, if Brendan Sorsby went to the NFL draft this year, he would not have made anywhere near $5 million because he is not that good of a quarterback. That's another situation. That's one of the reasons why Kurt Cignetti says the current NIL system is so unsustainable, is because players are massively overvalued. That's the implication. He didn't say that explicitly, but I think that's the implication. Players are overvalued. They go to the highest bidder. Okay, so if somebody pays me $5 million, my value is $5 million. No. But that's the case for Brendan Sorsby. And the fact of the matter is, Brendan Sorsby is a high-profile example of the sports betting plague on our society, especially when it comes to young, impressionable, college-aged, impulsive men. I am one of those. I am a 22-year-old college graduate. Now, when I turned 21, did I place some bets? Yes. I lost about $100 on FanDuel. That's it. And I realized, this could be a big drain very quickly, and I want no part of it. So I got out before it became an addiction. It was not an addiction. I placed maybe 5 bets. I don't think I won any of them. And the fact that Sorsby needed a stake in the games, besides rooting for his teammates, is another problem. But Brendan Sorsby absolutely cannot be allowed to play for Texas Tech this year, because that would represent a massive compromise in the competitive integrity of college sports. No American professional or any sports league, not just professional, the NCAA is quasi-professional, pseudo-professional, I don't know. I don't know what it is at this point. They don't know what it is at this point. So heck if I know, right? But the NBA cannot be the first American sports league to allow an athlete who has wagered on games in their own sport to continue playing. That would be the death of competitive integrity in college sports, in all college sports. We saw multiple examples of this in college basketball. Players getting banned outright for wagering on their own team. There were some players, I believe, at Long Island. There were 3 players who were found to have thrown games while being a member of the team, being on the floor during regular season games and actively conspiring to rig the outcomes. Those players were banned for life. No exceptions. And I think the same has to happen to Brendan Sorsby. Otherwise, the NCAA sets a very, very dangerous precedent when it comes to college football. I think this might be me being an old head. I've got a few old head takes. One is that the home team should always wear white in the NBA. And another is that sports betting should only be legal in person. In person. That's it. It should not be legal on your phone. It should not be allowed. That is bad, because that makes it so much easier to end up like Brendan Sorsby, where you get friends on it. Hey, let me transfer you some money so you can place this bet on my behalf. It's illegal to bet on sports in Texas from your phone. You cannot do that. And I to be clear, I'm not implying that Brendan Sorsby is a criminal. I'm not implicating him in anything. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty, and that includes him. But the implication is there that you are so entrenched in it that those are the lengths you have to go to get your fix. And I'm not going here to villainize Brendan Sorsby. He is a human. It is clear that he, like all of us, is flawed, right? I have no moral high ground here. Brendan Sorsby is a victim of a larger problem in our society when it comes to sports betting and the accessibility and the pervasiveness that has made it such a plague. And I know it's a running joke, like, oh, Brendan Sorsby's a sicko. He's one of us. Free him. He did nothing wrong. Stop that. It delegitimizes the extent of the problem that sports betting is. In my opinion, that is my opinion. That is the view of nobody else. I espouse that view alone, and I own whatever consequences come with having that view. I do not think sports betting, as pervasive as it is a good thing. For example, I don't think that the NBA's official sports betting partner should be anybody. Anybody. The NBA, the Jerry West logo, should not be in a sports gambling commercial. That should not be a controversial take. You wonder why people think the NBA is rigged. It's because they are in bed with sports betting companies. The NBA is not the only league. The NFL is in on it. MLB is in on it. I could go on. European soccer is in on it with different books, but it's the same idea. And at some point, we got to say enough is enough. Otherwise, this is going to end up like cigarettes did. My doctor only smokes Camel cigarettes, you know? And then, it turns out Big Tobacco was lying and causing a lot of people to get very sick. And they basically, it was a whole thing. This was before I was even alive. But the idea is that we don't recognize the long-term negative effects of something until it is too late and until far too many people have been harmed. And I think we're already there with sports betting. I do. I think Brendan Sorsby is a very high-profile case, but I think there are a lot of people who are in his shoes when it comes to being addicted to sports betting and it being a drain on their personal lives. And it's a shame. It's a shame because sports should be about celebrating athletic achievements, overcoming adversity, hardening yourself physically and mentally, competing at the highest level, testing the limits of human strength and human capability, teamwork, coaching, pride, representing something, being part of something bigger than yourself, but instead it's about wagering, it's about money lines and prop bets and all these things. And we've lost the meaning of what sports should be about. Brendan Sorsby should not have had to put a financial stake into a team that he was a part of to feel something with that. He shouldn't have. Just being part of something bigger than yourself, working towards a common goal, should be enough. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, he was led to believe that it wasn't. And it stinks. And it's a problem, and it needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. I don't think Brendan Sorsby will ever play a snap for Texas Tech. I don't. And maybe that is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, hey, this guy was going to get a massive payday, and he squandered it because of sports betting. He lost his eligibility. Maybe that's what it takes. And if he has to be made an example of, then that's a shame. But at the end of the day, it seems to me that he broke the NCAA rules, and he needs to be held accountable because if the NCAA does not do what it has done with other athletes who are better on their own sports, then I and many others would consider the competitive integrity of the NCAA and all of college sports to be gone by the wayside. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday for one final time. Nick Rotacap with you. This show is over after today. It's been a phenomenal ride. It's been an experience that I will remember for the rest of my life hosting this show. Since the fall of 2024, I want to thank Kent Sterling once again. I want to thank Jeremy Gray for putting in a good word, putting my name into the mix. I took Jeremy's sportscasting class as a freshman at IU in the spring of 2023, and I was one of the only freshmen in that class. It was primarily juniors and seniors, and Jeremy saw something in me very early on and instilled in me confidence in myself and my abilities and inspired me to really pursue sports media in a way that I never thought that I would. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got to college. I knew maybe I wanted to write, but ultimately I found that using my voice is seemingly what I'm good at. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity that I've had to host this show here on 98.7 The Zone for the last couple of years. We've talked a lot of stuff. We've talked IU football, basketball, baseball, soccer, softball. Swim and dive was in there. Shout out Swim and Dive. Excellent program. That was the first program I ever covered at IU. And I can't believe it's over. It's gone by so fast. And this year, the one regret that I have is not being able to find a way to make it back here the day after IU beat Oregon. I was in Eugene for that game, which is why there was no show on October 12th, 2025, because I was taking a train from Eugene to Portland and then flying out of Portland back to the Eastern time zone. Actually, we flew back to Chicago. We took a red-eye. Worst experience of my life, taking a red-eye flight from Eugene to Chicago. We landed in Chicago, at about 6 a.m. Eastern, and then we drove straight down to Bloomington and made it in time for Curt Cignetti's Monday press conference. But because we were traveling in such a planes, trains, and automobiles fashion, I was not able to do this show the day after the Oregon game. That is a regret that I have. But you play the cards you're dealt, just like we were talking about with NIL and college football. You've got to play the cards you're dealt. And I am so thankful for the opportunity that I have had to host this show. Like I said, it got me my first job in sports media. I'm with 107.5 The Fan as a producer and a board operator. If you want to keep up with what I am up to, you can follow me on Twitter at Nick Rotacap. And I am so excited for what the future holds. It's scary because I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be in a year. At this time last year, I knew where I was going to be in a year. I knew I was going to be right here. But I don't know where I'm going to be in a year. But I do know that the experience that I have gained and the lessons that I have learned through this show and so many other sports media experiences that I have had over the last 4 years at IU Bloomington, those lessons and those experiences will guide me for the rest of my life. And I'm so thankful to Indiana University for all of the opportunities that it gave me, for all of the chances it gave me to learn, to make mistakes, to improve, to meet amazing people, to experience things, to cover a national championship. That was awesome. That was a bucket list item. That is a bucket list item for countless people, and I got to do it just by virtue of being a student here at the right time. I am unbelievably lucky to be in this position. I am thankful to all of my mentors and to all of the people who have guided me to this point, and that includes Kent Sterling, who has always been in my corner. And for one final time, thank you for listening to IU Sports Sunday here on 98.7 The Zone. Have a phenomenal summer, and I'll see you on the other side.